The market square of New Haven Colony buzzed with activity on festival day. Colored lights hung between the buildings, and the smell of cooking food from a dozen different worlds filled the air. Ji-won walked between the stalls with wide eyes, her small hand slipping from her mother's grip as something colorful caught her attention. The 8-year-old girl had lived on this colony her whole life, but festival days always felt magical. Nari turned to speak with a vendor and realized her daughter had wandered off. She felt a spike of worry but told herself not to panic. New Haven was safe. The colony had good security. Her husband Hyun made sure of that as the security chief. Still, she began walking quickly through the crowd, calling Ji-won's name. Ji-won had followed a floating light display into a quieter part of the market. The shops here sold fabrics and art instead of food. She stood admiring a wall hanging that showed a sunset on some alien world, when the first explosion shook the ground beneath her feet. Screaming erupted from the main square. Ji-won turned and ran back the way she had come, but more explosions sent debris falling across the path. Smoke filled the air. People ran in all directions, knocking into each other. The little girl pressed herself against a wall, tears running down her face as she called for her parents. A large hand grabbed her shoulder. Ji-won looked up into the face of something from nightmares. The creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in thick scales with eyes that held no kindness. The Korvax raider grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. He had come to New Haven with his crew for one purpose. Children brought high prices in the slave markets of the Outer Rim. Ji-won screamed and twisted away from the raider's grip. She ran blindly down an alley and ducked into the first open door she found. The shop inside was dim and cool, filled with bolts of soft fabric. She crawled behind a display table and made herself as small as possible. Talon had been in the back room when the attack started. The young Velrin hurried to the front of his shop, his thin arms shaking. The Velrin were not warriors. They stood only 4 feet tall with delicate builds and large eyes suited for their art and trade. Talon had never hurt anyone in his life, but when he saw the human child hiding behind his display, something changed inside him. 2 other Velrin emerged from neighboring shops. Mira ran a pottery studio next door and old Safin sold paintings. They had heard the child's crying. The 3 Velrin looked at each other, and though no words were spoken, they understood. They moved to stand between the door and the place where Ji-won hid. The Korvax raider kicked the door open moments later. He had to duck to fit through the frame. His weapon swept across the shop until he spotted movement behind the Velrin. His translator crackled as he spoke. "Move aside, little ones. I have no business with you. Just give me the human child and I leave you in peace." Talon's voice shook when he answered, but his words were clear. "No, she is afraid. We will not move." The raider laughed, a harsh sound like breaking stone. "You 3? You think you can stop me? I could break all of you with one hand." Mira stepped forward to stand beside Talon. Her voice was softer but just as firm. "Perhaps you could, but you will have to break us to reach her." Safin, who had lived 70 years and had children and grandchildren on the Velrin homeworld, completed their line. He said nothing at all. He simply stood with his arms spread wide. The raider's amusement faded. He raised his weapon. "Last chance, little fools." None of the Velrin moved. What happened next took only seconds but would echo across the galaxy for decades. The raider opened fire. Safin fell first, his frail body unable to withstand even one shot. Mira screamed and rushed forward, throwing herself at the raider's legs. He kicked her aside like she weighed nothing. Talon grabbed a bolt of heavy fabric and threw it at the raider's face, then lunged forward with no plan except to buy seconds more time. The raider's armored fist caught Talon in the chest. The young Velrin felt ribs crack as he flew backward. He hit the wall and crumpled to the floor. Through blurring vision, he saw the raider step over Mira's still form. The massive alien reached toward the sobbing child. Then the door exploded inward. Hyun had been in the command center when the attack began. He had sent his officers to the main square where most civilians needed protection. But his wife had screamed through the communicator that she couldn't find Ji-won, that their daughter was lost somewhere in the market. Hyun had grabbed his weapon and ran into the chaos, following the path his daughter had taken. He heard the screaming from inside the fabric shop. He didn't hesitate. He blasted the door lock and came through with his weapon raised. What he saw froze him for half a second. 2 Velrin lay on the ground, clearly dead or dying. A third sat slumped against the wall, blood spreading across his simple merchant's clothing, and his daughter, his little Ji-won, pressed into the corner behind them. The Korvax raider turned toward this new threat. He was fast, but Hyun was faster and driven by a parent's terror. The security chief put 3 shots into the raider's center mass. The alien's armor held for the first 2 shots, but the third punched through. The raider staggered back. More security officers poured through the door behind Hyun. They engaged the raider, who fought with desperate strength. It took 6 of them to bring him down. By the time the shooting stopped, the shop was destroyed and smoke filled the air. Hyun ran to his daughter. He pulled Ji-won into his arms and felt her small body shaking with sobs. She clung to him and tried to speak through her tears. "They saved me, Papa. The nice people saved me." They wouldn't move. He hurt them because they wouldn't move. Hyun looked at the 3 Velrin. Sifin and Mira were already gone. But Talon still breathed, though each breath sounded wet and labored. Hyun shouted for a medic while his daughter cried into his shoulder. Nari arrived minutes later, having fought her way through the chaos. She dropped to her knees beside her husband and daughter, pulling them both close. Over Ji-won's head, she saw the bodies of the Velrin merchants. She understood what had happened here. These gentle people had stood against a monster. They had chosen to die rather than let harm come to someone else's child. The medics worked on Talon, their faces grim. The young Velrin's eyes fluttered open once. He saw the human family together and safe. A small smile crossed his face before he lost consciousness. The attack on New Haven ended an hour later. The Korvax raiders fled, having suffered heavier losses than expected. Colony security counted the dead and wounded. The medical teams worked through the night, but in one destroyed fabric shop, the security cameras had recorded everything. Every word spoken, every moment of impossible courage, every second that 3 small, gentle beings had stood against certain death to protect a child they didn't know. By morning, that recording would begin its journey across human space, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be quite the same again. Young-mi had been a journalist for 15 years. She had covered wars, natural disasters, and political scandals across a dozen star systems. She thought she had seen everything that could move people to tears or rage. Then the footage from New Haven arrived at her network's offices on Earth. She watched it 3 times before she could speak. The recording showed everything. The small Velrin standing their ground, the raiders' threats, the moment when they chose death over surrender. The way Talon had thrown himself forward with no weapon, no armor, nothing but the desperate need to buy 1 more second for a child to live. Young-mi sent the footage to her editor with shaking hands. Within 2 hours, it was broadcasting across every human world. Within 4 hours, riots had started on 3 colonies as humans demanded their governments respond. Within 6 hours, the Galactic Council had called an emergency session because Earth's representatives were making unprecedented demands. On Earth itself, people stopped in the streets to watch the footage on public screens. They watched in their homes. They watched on their personal devices. And everywhere humans saw it, the reaction was the same: tears, rage, and a grinding determination that something had to change. Hyun and Nari received thousands of messages. Most asked the same thing: what could they do? How could they help? What did the Velrin need? The couple sat in their small apartment on New Haven with Ji-won between them, overwhelmed by the response. Their daughter had not spoken much since the attack. She mostly drew pictures of 3 small figures standing together. The hospital reported that Talon would survive, though his recovery would take months. The news brought some relief, but it couldn't bring back Mira and Sifin. Their bodies had been prepared for return to the Velrin homeworld according to their customs. Nari had stood vigil with the Velrin community at the hospital, learning their songs of mourning. She sang them now to Ji-won at night, on Velara, the Velrin homeworld. Council Elder Varen watched the human broadcasts with confusion. The Velrin had always been practical people. They understood that in the galaxy's harsh reality, the strong dominated the weak. They traded carefully, avoided conflicts, and survived by being useful but not threatening. What Talon, Mira, and Sifin had done was certainly brave, perhaps foolishly so. But why were the humans reacting so strongly? Viren had lived long enough to be skeptical of other species' motives. When the human ambassador requested a meeting, he expected demands for trade concessions or basing rights, some way that humanity would leverage this tragedy to their advantage. Instead, Ambassador Doyen arrived with a document that made no sense at all. The ambassador was a young man by Velrin standards, only in his 40s. but his eyes held the weight of what he had watched, what all of humanity had watched. He sat across from Varan in the simple meeting chamber and spoke without the usual political pleasantries. 3 of your people died defending a human child, Doyen said. They didn't know her. They owed us nothing. They chose to stand anyway. Varan nodded slowly. It was very brave. We honor their memory. But why are you here, Ambassador? What does Earth want from us? Doyen slid the document across the table. We're not here to ask for anything, Elder Varan. We're here to give you something. Earth's government has passed the Human Protection Act. As of this morning, the Velrin species falls under humanity's formal protection. Any attack on a Velrin anywhere in known space will be treated as an attack on humanity itself. We will defend you as we defend our own. Varan stared at the document without touching it. I don't understand. Protection requires resources, military forces. Why would you bind yourselves this way? The ambassador's voice remained steady. Because 3 of your people stood against a monster to save one of ours. Because they knew they would die and they stood anyway. Because that kind of courage deserves an answer. He paused and his voice grew softer. Because humans don't forget debts like this. But the cost, Varan protested. To protect our entire species across all our worlds? The military commitment alone would be enormous. What do you gain? Doyen met the elder's eyes. This isn't about gain. This is about honor. Earth's government voted unanimously. I have never seen our politicians agree on anything so quickly. He pushed the document closer. We're not asking permission, Elder Varan. We're informing you of what has already been decided. Your people are under our protection now. That's not negotiable. News of Earth's declaration spread through the Galactic Council chambers like wildfire. The other species representatives struggled to understand the logic. The Dalthek's ambassador openly mocked it as sentimental foolishness. The Krill delegation saw it as a weakness to exploit. The Axian traders calculated how to profit from it. But Admiral Soman, commanding the 3rd Human Fleet, received her orders without question. She redirected her battle group toward Velrin space. 12 warships, 3 carriers and their support vessels began the journey that would position them within striking distance of any threat to Velrin worlds. The Admiral stood on her flagship's bridge and watched the stars blur past at faster-than-light speeds. Her 2nd officer approached carefully. Admiral, some of the crew are asking questions. They want to know why we're abandoning our patrol routes for this. Soman turned to face him. Show them the footage from New Haven if they haven't seen it, all of it. Then ask them if they'd want to be the ones who didn't show up when those people call for help. The 2nd officer nodded and left. Soman returned her attention to the view screen. She had 3 children herself. When she had watched that footage, she had imagined them in that shop. She had imagined strangers choosing to die for them. The idea had broken something in her chest and remade it stronger. On Valara, Varan finally picked up the document. He read through the formal language and legal commitments. Human ships would patrol Velrin space. Human engineers would help upgrade their defenses. Human traders would offer favorable terms. All of it in exchange for nothing. The document had already been signed by Earth's president and ratified by their global council. Varan's hands shook slightly. His people had spent centuries being careful, being small, avoiding notice. And now the humans, a species that commanded hundreds of worlds and thousands of warships, had declared the entire Velrin species worth protecting. Worth dying for. He thought of Talon, Mira, and Sifin, 3 ordinary people who had made an extraordinary choice, and somehow that choice had moved an entire species to bind themselves in defense of his own. Youngmi's broadcast continued to spread across the galaxy. She interviewed humans from every world. Construction workers and corporate executives, soldiers and teachers, all saying the same thing in different words. They stood for one of ours. We'll stand for all of theirs. She managed to get a brief interview with Talon in his hospital bed. The young Velrin was still weak, his chest wrapped in bandages. Youngmi asked him why he had done it. Talon's voice was soft and rough. She was a child. She was afraid. What else could we do? He paused, struggling for words. We are not warriors. We are not strong. But we could stand. So we stood. The interview played continuously across human networks. Youngmi watched the message counters scroll upward into the millions. She had reported on many stories, but never one that united humanity like this. There was something primal in the response. Something ancient. An oath written in the oldest parts of the human soul. If you defend our children, we defend your species. No matter the cost. On New Haven Colony, workers began construction on a memorial. 3 simple statues of Velrin standing together. The inscription below would read their names and a single line. They stood when they could have stepped aside. G1 visited the construction site every day with her parents. She left flowers, though Velrin custom didn't use flowers in mourning. She sat and drew her pictures. And slowly other children began joining her. Human children and Velrin children together, leaving their own offerings. Hyun watched his daughter and felt the weight of what had happened. His job was to protect the colony, but he had failed to protect G1. 3 strangers had paid the price for his failure. Yet somehow their sacrifice had created something he had never seen before, a bond between species that transcended politics or trade, something deeper and more real. Nari held his hand as they watched the children. "They changed everything," she said quietly. Hyun nodded. He thought about the human fleet now moving toward Velrin space. He thought about the riots on human worlds demanding action. He thought about his daughter asking every day if Talon was okay. "We won't let anyone forget," he said. "Not ever." In the Galactic Council, the other species continued to debate and question. But on Earth and across all human worlds, the matter was settled. The Velrin were under protection. Any species that wanted to test that protection would learn what humanity meant when they made a promise. 6 months after New Haven, the Krill Empire decided to test humanity's resolve. Their warlords had watched the Protection Act with contempt. Humans claimed they would defend the weak Velrin, but words were cheap. The Krill believed in strength. They believed in taking what they wanted, and they wanted the resource-rich colony world of Velith Minor. The fact that Velrin settlers lived there meant nothing to the Krill, or rather, it meant an opportunity. If the humans failed to respond, their protection declaration would be exposed as empty rhetoric. Other species would learn that human promises meant nothing, and if the humans did respond, the Krill would get the fight they wanted. Warlord Thaxor commanded the attack fleet. 15 heavy cruisers, dozens of fighters, and enough firepower to flatten the colony. He sat in his command throne and watched Velith Minor grow larger on the view screen. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents. Soon it would be a Krill world. On the surface, Minseo watched the Krill ships appear in orbit with rising terror. She was the colony leader, responsible for 3,000 Velrin souls. When the first warning came from their basic defense satellites, she had hoped it was a mistake. When the second warning confirmed multiple warships taking attack positions, she knew it was not. Minseo's hands shook as she activated the emergency beacon. The human fleet had installed it 6 months ago. Admiral Soman herself had come to Velith Minor to place the device in their communications center. The Admiral had been very clear. If any threat came, use the beacon immediately. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Minseo pressed the activation button and spoke into the recorder. "This is Velith Minor. We are under attack by Krill warships. They are preparing to fire on our colony." Her voice broke slightly. "Please, if you hear this, please help us." The beacon transmitted in all directions at faster than light speeds. Minseo sent her people to the shelters that human engineers had built. She knew those shelters wouldn't survive a sustained orbital bombardment, but she had to try. She had to believe that somewhere humans were listening. The HSS Retribution and 2 escort destroyers were on patrol 4 light-years away when the beacon signal reached them. Captain Taijin was reviewing supply reports when his communications officer suddenly shouted for attention. The young captain moved quickly to the communications station and listened to Minseo's message. His executive officer appeared at his shoulder. "Sir, we're not the Rapid Response Group. That's the Valiant's battle group. They're 8 hours away. We should forward the message and maintain our patrol route." Taijin played the message again. He heard the fear in Minseo's voice. He heard her desperate hope that someone would hear. He thought about the footage from New Haven that every human had seen. He thought about 3 small Velrin standing against death. "No," Taijin said quietly. "We're going. Helm, plot an intercept course for Velith Minor, maximum speed." "Captain, that's directly against standing orders. We could face a court-martial." Taijin turned to face his crew. Every eye on the bridge was watching him. "Yes, we could. And if any of you want to note an objection in the log, I'll accept that. But I'm not leaving them to die while we wait for someone else to show up." He looked at each crew member in turn. "Those people called for help, we answer. That's what the Protection Act means." No one objected. The helmsman laid in the course. The Retribution and her escorts jumped to faster-than-light speeds, racing toward Velith Minor. On the surface, the first orbital strikes hit the edges of the colony. Krill targeting systems prioritized the communications arrays and power generators. Minseo huddled in the command shelter with her senior staff, listening to the explosions above. They had sent the message. They had done everything they could. Now they could only wait. One of her assistants, a young Velrin named Kira, looked at Minseo with wide eyes. Will they really come? The humans? Minseo wanted to say yes with confidence, but she was terrified that she had just sent her people to their deaths on false hope. I don't know, she admitted. We can only pray. The Retribution dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Velith Minor system. Tyjan's tactical officer immediately began feeding him data. The Krill fleet was in close orbit, systematically destroying the colony's infrastructure. But they hadn't started hitting residential areas yet. There was still time. Tyjan opened a channel to the Krill flagship. His voice was calm and cold. Attention, Krill vessels. You are attacking a species under the protection of humanity. You have one chance to withdraw. Leave now or be destroyed. Warlord Thaxer's translator rendered his laughter into human speech. 3 human ships against my fleet? You are brave or stupid. Either way, you will die. You were warned, Tyjan said, and closed the channel. He looked at his weapons officer. All batteries fire at will. Target their flagship first. The battle was brutal and one-sided. The Krill had superior numbers, but human weapons technology was decades ahead. The Retribution's missiles tore through Krill shields like paper. Her energy weapons carved through their armor. Within minutes, the Krill flagship was burning and dead in space. The other Krill ships tried to surround the human vessels, but Tyjan had trained his crew well. They moved as one unit, covering each other, concentrating their fire. One by one, the Krill ships broke apart under the assault. Thaxor managed to launch an emergency message before his flagship's core detonated. The message would reach Krill space and report the disaster, but it wouldn't save him. His last sight was the human destroyer moving into final attack position. On the surface, the explosions overhead changed. Instead of impacts on the colony, Minseo heard the sounds of battle in space. Ship weapons firing, shields collapsing, the deep rumble of something large breaking apart. Then a new voice came through the colony's emergency speakers. A human voice speaking, "Careful, Velrin. Velith Minor, this is Captain Tyjan of the HSS Retribution. The Krill fleet is neutralized. You are safe. We're sending shuttles with medical supplies and repair equipment. You're not alone." Minseo collapsed into her chair and wept. Around her, the other Velrin in the shelter did the same. They had called for help, barely daring to hope. And the humans had come. They had actually come. Lieutenant Jinwoo led the Marine landing force. His soldiers moved through the damaged colony with practiced efficiency, helping evacuate Velrin from damaged structures, setting up medical stations, distributing food and water. The Velrin civilians watched them with amazement. These warriors had just destroyed an entire enemy fleet, and now they were gently carrying injured children and elderly to safety. One Marine, a medic named Yunji, was helping clear rubble when a secondary explosion tore through the building she was in. She threw herself over 3 Velrin children, shielding them with her armored body. The blast killed her instantly, but the children survived without a scratch. Jinwoo found Yunji's body an hour later. The children she had saved were still sitting beside her, too shocked to move. He lifted them gently and carried them to safety, one at a time. Then he came back for Yunji. She would go home with honors. She would be remembered, just like Talon, Mira, and Sifan were remembered. Minseo met Captain Tyjan when his shuttle landed in the main square. She had prepared a speech, but the words died when she saw him. The human captain was young, maybe 30 by their years. His uniform showed scorch marks from weapons fire. He looked tired and sad. "Thank you," Minseo managed to say. "You saved us." "You actually came." Tyjan nodded slowly. "We'll always come. That's the promise." He looked around at the damaged colony. "We're sending construction teams. You'll be rebuilt within weeks." He met her eyes. "And we're stationing a permanent patrol in this system. No one will threaten you again." "But why?" Minseo asked. "We are not strong. We have nothing to offer you. Why do you do this?" Tyjan pulled up an image on his personal device. It showed 3 Velrin standing in a fabric shop. "Because your people did this." "Because when it mattered, they chose to stand." He closed the image. That's worth defending. That's worth everything. Minseo understood then. This was not politics. This was not strategy. This was something deeper, something about who humans were at their core. Taejin made sure his crew recorded everything. The destroyed krill ships, the battle data, the timing of their response. He transmitted it all to every spacefaring species in the sector with a simple message attached. The Velrin are under humanity's protection. This is not negotiable. This is not a bluff. Test it at your own risk. The message was clear. The krill had tested humanity's resolve and they had been erased from existence for it. 15 warships destroyed, thousands of krill dead, and the humans showed no regret. Only grim satisfaction that the promise had been kept. Across the galaxy, species that had been watching carefully suddenly understood. The humans were not posturing. The Protection Act was not politics. It was an oath written in blood and steel. On Velith Minor, the Velrin began to rebuild, but they rebuilt with human engineers working beside them, with human ships overhead watching for threats, with the knowledge that somewhere in the vast darkness of space, if they called for help, humans would come running. Not for profit, not for power, but because a promise had been made, and humanity kept its promises. 2 years after New Haven, the galaxy had adjusted to a new reality. The Velrin were no longer considered weak targets. They were humanity's protected species, and everyone knew what that meant. But something unexpected had happened. The protection had evolved into something deeper, something that looked less like a military alliance and more like family. Ji-won was 10 years old now. She still lived on New Haven with her parents, but her world had expanded far beyond the colony. Every week she had a video call scheduled with Talon. The young Velrin had recovered from his injuries, though he still moved with a slight stiffness. He had moved to Earth 8 months ago, to the city of Seattle, where he had opened a cultural center teaching Velrin arts and traditions. Their latest call found Talon showing Ji-won the new tapestry he was working on. The design showed 2 figures, one human and one Velrin, standing side by side under a shared sky. Ji-won held up her own artwork, a painting she had made in school. It showed the same theme, though with a child's simpler style. "I've been learning Velrin songs," Ji-won said, her face bright on the screen. "Teacher Hana says I'm getting good at the pronunciation." Talon's large eyes seemed to glow with happiness. "Your mother tells me you speak Velrin better than some Velrin children. You honor us, little one. When can I visit you on Earth?" Ji-won asked. "Mom says maybe next summer." "I would like that very much," Talon said. "I will teach you to weave, and we will visit the memorial together." The memorial he referred to stood in Seattle's Central Park. It was a replica of the one on New Haven, showing 3 Velrin standing in protection. But this one was surrounded by gardens where human and Velrin children played together every day. It had become a symbol of the bond between the species. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out thousands of times each day. Human children learned Velrin language in schools. Velrin students studied at human universities. Mixed crews served on trading ships and exploration vessels. The integration had happened naturally, almost organically. Ambassador Sun-hee worked from the human embassy on Valara. Her job was to manage diplomatic relations, but she spent most of her time just getting out of the way. The relationship between humans and Velrin didn't need managing. It had taken on a life of its own. She attended a ceremony at one of Valara's largest cities. A new school was opening, funded half by human donors and half by Velrin families. The curriculum would teach both species' histories, languages, and customs. The children attending wouldn't see each other as alien. They would see each other as just different kinds of normal. Sun-hee watched human and Velrin parents chatting together, their children already playing without any sense of separation. She thought about her briefings from 2 years ago, when her job was to sell the Protection Act to skeptical Velrin leaders. Now those same leaders asked her for advice on managing the flood of cultural exchange programs. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" A voice beside her spoke in perfect human English. Elder Varen had stepped up to join her. The old Velrin looked different now. "Less wary, less tired, it is," Sun-hee agreed. "I never expected it to become this." Varen smiled, an expression humans had learned to read on Velrin faces. "Neither did we. We thought you would station ships above our worlds and call that protection. We did not expect you to send teachers, to adopt our orphans, to learn our songs." "We couldn't help it," Sun-hee said honestly. After what happened, after what your people did for Jiwon, we wanted to know you. Really know you. And the more we learned, the more we liked what we found. The feeling is mutual, Varen said. My grandchildren speak human languages as well as they speak Velrin. They celebrate both our festivals and yours. When I ask them what they want to be when they grow up, half say they want to serve on a joint human Velrin ship. He paused. This is not protection anymore, Ambassador. This is kinship. Sunhee nodded slowly. He was right. Somewhere along the way, the Protection Act had transformed into something neither species had planned, but both had needed. Captain Bora commanded the CSV Horizon, the first ship jointly designed and crewed by both species. Half her officers were human, half were Velrin. The ship's systems incorporated technology from both civilizations. Even the name CSV stood for Combined Species Vessel. They were on a deep space exploration mission, charting systems beyond known space. Bora walked through the ship's corridors and saw her crew working together seamlessly, a Velrin engineer explaining a problem to a human technician, a human medic learning Velrin medical techniques. The integration was complete. Her first officer, a Velrin named Kase, found her on the observation deck. They stood together looking out at the unfamiliar stars. Do you remember when this mission was announced? Case asked. The Galactic Council said it would fail, that our species were too different to crew a ship together effectively. Bora smiled. I remember. They said we'd be at each other's throats within a month. We've been out here for 6 months, Case observed. I think we've proven them wrong. More than wrong, Bora said. We've shown them what's possible when species actually trust each other. She gestured at the stars. Out here, there's no human space or Velrin space. There's just us together, exploring the unknown. Back on Earth, a different kind of milestone was being reached. The first joint colony was being established. Hope's Landing, they called it. Half the colonists were human, half Velrin. The settlement would be built from the ground up with both species' needs in mind. The governor, a human woman named Isolde, stood with her Velrin co-governor Timan as the first transport ships landed. They watched families disembark, humans and Velrin mixed together. Children of both species running and playing while their parents unloaded belongings. This is what the future looks like, Isolde said quietly. Timan nodded agreement. Not humans helping Velrin. Not protection or charity. Just people building a life together. Other species in the galaxy watched these developments with mixed reactions. Some, like the peaceful Axion, found it inspiring. They saw the possibility of similar bonds between their species and others. Some, like the aggressive Krill remnants, saw it as proof that humans were soft and sentimental. But a few species, particularly those who had bullied or exploited the Velrin before the Protection Act, began approaching human ambassadors with careful questions. Could such protection be extended to them? Could they have what the Velrin had? The answer was always the same. Gnome Ambassador Doyun explained it to a delegation of Rothans who had come seeking a similar arrangement. You don't understand what happened. This isn't transactional. We didn't protect the Velrin to gain allies or expand influence. 3 Velrin died defending a human child. They didn't know her. They owed us nothing. They stood anyway, the Rothan ambassador pressed. But surely we could negotiate terms. We have resources you need. We could offer favorable trade agreements. Doyen's face hardened. You want to buy what the Velrin earned with blood? You want to make a deal to get what they gave freely? He stood. This meeting is over. When your species does something as brave as what Talon, Mira, and Sifin did, then we'll talk. Not before. The message spread quickly. Humanity's bond with the Velrin couldn't be copied or bought. It was unique, born from a specific moment of impossible courage and answered with absolute commitment. On New Haven, Hyun walked his daughter to school every morning. Jiwon attended a mixed classroom now with both human and Velrin students. Her best friend was a young Velrin girl named Sela, whose family had moved to the colony specifically because it was where the Brave Ones stood. Nari worked at the colony's xenobiology lab, but her research had shifted. She studied how to better integrate Velrin and human medical treatments, how to make sure both species received optimal care. She published her findings freely, sending them to every human and Velrin medical facility. She visited Talon's memorial every week. Other families did the same. It had become a place not of mourning but of celebration. Children left drawings. Adults left flowers in both human and Velrin styles. Someone always kept fresh candles burning. One evening, Nari brought Jiwon to the memorial and found a Velrin family there. The parents were teaching their young son about what had happened. The child listened with wide eyes as his father explained how 3 Velrin had stood against a monster to save a human girl. "Why did they do it?" the boy asked. His mother knelt beside him. "Because she needed help. Because it was right. Because that is who we choose to be." The boy looked at the statues for a long moment. Then he looked at Jiwon, who stood nearby with her mother. "Are you the girl?" Jiwon nodded. The boy walked over to her and offered his hand in the Velrin gesture of friendship. She took it, and they stood together. 2 children of different species connected by a story of sacrifice and response. Nari felt tears on her cheeks. This was what had grown from that terrible day in the fabric shop. Not just protection, but understanding. Not just alliance, but love. The galaxy would never be quite the same. Humanity and the Velrin had shown what was possible when species looked past differences and saw each other as equals. As friends, as family. And it had all started because 3 small, gentle people had chosen to stand when they could have stepped aside. 20 years had passed since the incident on New Haven. The galaxy had changed in ways both large and small, but nowhere was the change more visible than in the relationship between humanity and the Velrin. What had started as a protection declaration had evolved into something the Galactic Council still struggled to define. Jiwon stood on the bridge of the CSV Unity, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the view screen. At 28, she commanded the most advanced joint species vessel ever built. The Unity wasn't just crewed by humans and Velrin. It was designed by both species working as one. Every system, every protocol, every detail reflected their combined strengths. Her executive officer approached from the tactical station. Commander Baeom, a Velrin who had grown up on Earth, handed her a data tablet. "Patrol reports are clean, Captain. No incidents in this sector for 3 months." Jiwon reviewed the information and nodded. "Good, let's keep it that way." She looked at Baeom and smiled. "Remember when we were at the academy together? And that Dalthex instructor said mixed crews would never work?" Baeom's expression showed amusement. Velrin faces still looked alien to some species, but humans had learned to read every subtle shift. "I remember. He said we were too different. That trust between species was impossible." Wonder what he'd say now, Jiwon mused. On Earth, Talon walked through the gardens surrounding the memorial in Seattle. He moved slower now, the injuries from 20 years ago having left permanent marks. But he moved with purpose and dignity. His cultural center had grown beyond anything he had imagined. Thousands of humans and Velrin passed through its doors every year, learning about each other, celebrating together. He stopped at the memorial statues. Someone had left fresh flowers that morning. They always did. 20 years and people still came to remember. Still came to honor 3 Velrin who had made a choice in a fabric shop. A young voice called out, "Grandfather Talon." He turned to see a human girl running toward him, maybe 7 years old. Behind her walked her parents, a human father and a Velrin mother. Mixed families like theirs were common now. The girl crashed into Talon's legs and hugged him tightly. "We learned about you in school today," she said excitedly. "Teacher showed us the old videos. You were so brave." Talon knelt down to her level, his joints creaking slightly. "I was terrified," he told her honestly. "But sometimes being brave means standing even when you're afraid." The girl's parents reached them. The father nodded respectfully. "Sorry if she's bothering you." She insisted on coming to the memorial after class. "No bother at all," Talon assured them. He looked at the mixed family, at the child who saw nothing strange in having parents from different species. This was the world that had grown from that terrible day. This was the legacy. On Valara, the Galactic Council was meeting in special session. The chamber was full, with representatives from dozens of species. The topic under discussion had been debated for months. Finally, they would vote on formal recognition of the Human-Velrin Alliance. Elder Varan, now ancient by Velrin standards, stood to speak. His voice was strong despite his age. 20 years ago, humanity declared my species under their protection. We thought it was politics. We thought it would fade. We were wrong. He looked around the chamber. What humanity and the Velrin have built together goes beyond protection, beyond alliance. We are family now. Our children grow up speaking both languages. Our scientists work on joint research. Our ships explore together. This is not treaty. This is kinship. Ambassador Doyen stood to add his voice. He had gray in his hair now, but his eyes still held the same determination. We're not asking for special status or privileges. We're asking for recognition of what already exists, a bond between species that has made both of us stronger. The Dalthek's representative, always skeptical, spoke up. But what does this mean legally? How do we define such a relationship? It's unprecedented. Dayun, a young Velrin delegate, rose to respond. She had been born after the Protection Act. She had grown up in a galaxy where humans and Velrin were already intertwined. You want to define it? Here is your definition. We are two species who chose each other, not for profit, not for power, because when it mattered most, each showed the other what honor meant. She paused. If that's unprecedented, then perhaps the rest of the galaxy should learn from our example. The vote was called. The Human-Velrin Alliance was formally recognized by the Galactic Council, not as a treaty between separate powers, but as something entirely new, a voluntary joining of two species into a permanent bond. Across human and Velrin space, the news was met with quiet satisfaction. The formal recognition changed nothing practical. The bond had existed in hearts and homes for years, but the acknowledgement felt right somehow. On New Haven Colony, Hyun watched the council broadcast in his living room. He had retired from security work 5 years ago, but he remained active in the community. Nari sat beside him, her hand in his. Their daughter's face appeared on the screen as the news coverage shifted to feature stories. Captain Jiwon was interviewed about commanding the Unity. The reporter asked her what it meant to lead a mixed crew. Jiwon's answer was simple. It means trusting that my Velrin officers will do their jobs as well as any human. It means knowing my crew has my back regardless of species. It means we're stronger together than we ever could be apart. Hyun felt pride swell in his chest. His daughter had become a symbol of what the bond could achieve. But she was just one of thousands. An entire generation had grown up with the bond as normal. A sudden alert interrupted the broadcast, an emergency signal from a distant system. An unknown species fleeing genocide requesting asylum and aid. Their message was desperate and afraid. The Galactic Council immediately began debating response options. Jiwon didn't wait for debate. She looked at her crew. Human and Velrin faces looked back at her with the same determination. Helm set course for the distress signal. Maximum speed. Communication, send word that help is coming. Her first officer, now a human named Kangmin, raised an eyebrow. Captain, we don't have authorization yet. Jiwon smiled. We learned from the best. When someone calls for help, you answer. You don't wait for paperwork. She thought of Captain Tajin, who had made the same choice 20 years ago at Velith Minor. Besides, the council will approve. And if they don't, they can court-martial me later, after we save those people. The Unity jumped to faster-than-light speed, racing toward the unknown refugees. Behind them, other ships followed. Human vessels and Velrin vessels working together as they always did now. By the time the Galactic Council finished debating and authorized a response, the Unity and her sister ships had already reached the refugee fleet. Thousands of desperate beings from a species the galaxy had never seen before found themselves surrounded by human and Velrin ships offering aid and protection. The refugees' leader, exhausted and amazed, asked why they had come so quickly. Jiwon's response was broadcast across all channels. Because someone needs help. Because that's what family does. And because 20 years ago, 3 Velrin taught humanity what real courage looks like. We're still learning from their example. On Earth, in Seattle's Memorial Garden, Talon watched the broadcast of the rescue. Tears ran down his face. He thought of Mira and Sifan, who had never lived to see what their choice created. He hoped somehow they knew, that they understood their stand in a small fabric shop had changed the galaxy. A group of school children came through the garden, their teacher leading them to the memorial. Human and Velrin children mixed together, their differences unremarkable to them. They had always known a world where their species were bound together. The teacher told them the story, how 3 Velrin had protected a human child, how humanity had responded with protection that became partnership, how courage and honor had built a bridge between species that nothing could break. One of the children, a small human boy, raised his hand. Teacher, are we going to learn about the other species we helped too? The ones Captain Jiwon just saved? The teacher smiled. Maybe that's the beginning of a new story. Would you like that? The children cheered agreement. Already they saw themselves as the generation that would extend the bond further. That would show other species what humanity and the Velrin had learned together. Jiwan stood on the Unity's bridge as they escorted the refugee fleet to safety. Biom worked beside her, coordinating with Velrin support ships. Kangmin managed logistics with human supply vessels. The crew moved with practiced ease, each member knowing their role. She thought about her parents watching from New Haven, about Talon in his garden on Earth, about all the families, human and Velrin, who had built this bond together. She thought about the frightened child she had been in that fabric shop, and the 3 strangers who had chosen to die rather than let harm reach her. "Captain," her communications officer called. "We're receiving thousands of messages from both human and Velrin worlds. Everyone wants to help the refugees." Jiwan wasn't surprised. This was who they had become. 2 species who had learned that strength wasn't just about weapons or ships. It was about standing for those who couldn't stand for themselves, about answering calls for help, about choosing courage over safety. "Route the offers through diplomatic channels," Jiwan ordered.